once I started looking at the pictures, using my long lens so you can get right into the waves, I just began to see all these mythological creatures in the water. And people was like, well, what on earth are you drinking? What are you on that you can see all these things? But I know they're there.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Photographic Connections podcast. My name is Kim Grant, the founder of Photographic Connections, and it brings me great delight to welcome Nicki Gwynn-Jones onto the podcast this week. I was introduced to Nicki through some mutual connections after we both attended the Creative Light Festival in the Scottish Highlands last year. Although we never got the chance to meet there in person, I was very taken by how positively everybody spoke about her and her imagery. I therefore felt very compelled to reach out to her after the event and ask if she'd be interested in coming on the podcast. And I was delighted when she said yes. Now, Nicki is based in the Orkney Isles, which are off the north coast of Scotland, and she brings a lot of Orkney's magic into her imagery, creating beautiful photographs which really showcase flow and movement. I found speaking to Nicki really inspiring because my imagination was very much sparked, and it opened me up to all the beauty and magic that's in nature surrounding us that we can photograph. I also felt that Nicki was very good at giving us the permission and the freedom to do photography in whatever way we want to, which I felt was a really, really positive message. I'm sure you'll take a lot from listening to this week's podcast, and therefore, please join me in welcoming Nicki Gwynn-Jones. Hi, Nicki. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast this week.
Thank you for asking me, Kim. I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah, it's really nice. We just had a little conversation before we started recording, and we were both at the Creative Light Festival recently, but we never got the chance to properly meet. So it's really nice to be able to sit down with you now and have this chat. And you're based in the Orkney Isles, and it's a beautiful place up there, and we're going to delve into that quite a bit today. But before we do, I wondered if you could go back to the beginning of your journey and share the story of what got you into photography in the first place.
Of course. Well, my parents were very into photography. My dad and mum were very keen amateur naturalists and amateur photographers. My dad particularly was very accomplished. My one regret in life is that he didn't live long enough to see me take an interest, as is so often the way with these things. And we moved to America in 2001 when my children were teenagers. We spent 6 wonderful years there, and that was where I got into it, in fact. The last house that we lived in before we moved back, we had a family of huge Central American green iguanas living in the garden. Great big 6-foot things, fabulous, fabulous creatures. And I just became obsessed with them, with my little point and shoot. This was 2005, so, quite a long time ago. And then one of my cats knocked the camera onto the floor. So that was the excuse to buy something a little bit better. And I just became obsessed. And then, I realized that in Florida, you're surrounded by the most incredible wildlife. The bird life is just gorgeous. Alligators, turtles, I mean, you name it. It's wonderful. It's real wildlife. And the other thing that was very significant for me was that my dad's sister, my Auntie Catherine, I guess these days she would probably be diagnosed as autistic. Possibly, I think. She was incredibly talented and a very, very bright woman. She played the oboe beautifully. She could paint, she could draw. She knew everything about nature. But what she wasn't able to do was get that knowledge and passion out into the world. And when she died in 2003, and I came back to the UK for her funeral, I felt her sitting on my shoulder, imploring me to show the world the beauty that she had not been able to communicate. So that was very, very important. And she's there still. Birds were her particular love, and I guess they're my particular love too. So, I'm just very happy to be able to share, that. Yeah, we moved back to the UK. I joined Cheltenham Camera Club just, to learn because I was a beginner at that stage. And I learned a lot there. But ultimately, it wasn't for me because I just find camera clubs a bit rigid. But that's just me. Don't tell anyone I said that. But no, I did learn a lot, and I made friends that I still have to this day. So that was lovely. So that was kind of it, and it's kind of gone on from there. Really, I've been back to Florida a few times since we moved back to the UK to spend some time with the birds, which I always love. And of course, in Orkney, we're surrounded by beauty everywhere you look.
Yeah,
fantastic.
Wow, yeah. What a journey, Nicki! What a journey, and I love the family.
Lucky.
Yeah, and I love the family connection that you have with your photography and everything as well. It's clearly a very deep and meaningful thing to you that brings you so much joy. And I love this, being able to share it with the world and share that creation. It's very, very powerful. And what made you move up to Orkney then?
Oh, it was a bit of a whim, to be honest. Well, it was me really. I wanted to move to Harris and Lewis, or the Isle of Harris first of all, but it just wasn't to be. It just did not work out for us, for various logistical reasons. We looked at Northumberland and the borders, which we also love. Couldn't find anything suitable. Thought about Shetland and then thought, no, that's too far. And then I actually remembered that Orkney has many festivals. We have the St Magnus Festival for music and literature. We have, a world-class folk festival. We have a storytelling festival, a rock festival, all sorts of things. So we looked on Rightmove and we found 3 possible houses, and we basically just booked a weekend here and bought the first one. And as is the way of things here, it was a new build but not quite finished. The builder showed us around, and the next day we told him we wanted to buy it, and we just went round to his kitchen and had a cup of coffee and shook hands on it, and that was that. It just fell into place, and I think when something's right, don't you? When something falls into place like that.
100%, 100%. I always believe if something's meant for you, it'll just unfold. And I mean, Orkney, I was up there this summer for about 3 or 4 days, and I hadn't realised. Yeah, I had friends over from Canada, and they've got distant relatives over there. So we went over and stayed in Kirkwall with them for 3 nights. But I hadn't actually realised how that the community over there, it's like a country on its own in some respects. Like, you've got everything in Orkney. There's so much going on, and the community element was so strong. And I found that really, really beautiful.
Yeah, it definitely is. And it was very funny because when we, about a year after we arrived, a dear friend came to visit from South. And she was like, oh, you've got a Tesco and you have shops. Yes, we do. As you say, we have everything. We have an almost brand new hospital. We have a beautiful sports centre, fantastic facilities there. A beautiful pool, rock climbing, a cinema. Every class you could want. Good schools. It's brilliant. It really is. I highly recommend it. Of course, the problem is, a lot of people are hearing about it now and want to come, which is fantastic. But there's never enough housing, as is always the way with these things. It's getting to the islands, getting materials to the islands is expensive. There's only so much land. But, going forward, we'll see. But it is a great community. Everybody was incredibly welcoming. People just knocked on the door and said hello and, helped us out when we needed it. They still do. It's really great. I can do things for people. People do things for us. There's always somebody who will be there for you, which is really great.
Yeah, we definitely need more of that in the world. And I think just seeing what it's like in Orkney is beautiful. And there's, of course, a very strong culture and arts theme over there as well, which ties in very nicely with your photography.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we have, many, many wonderful artists here of all sorts of genre, really, painters, sculptors, etching, photography, writers, poets. Yeah, it's a fantastic mix. It really is. Yeah. It has to be said, though, that most of the people I actually hang out with are open water swimmers.
Yes. I was going to ask you about that a little bit later.
Pretty bonkers activity up here, but hey.
I know there's a big community of it. I used to do it here where I live. I've not done it for about a year and a half now, but I got very into it after the first few, the lockdowns, and I really enjoyed it. And people thought I was mad, but I mean, it was amazing. When you get into it and you get used to it and you feel that rush, it's beautiful. So yeah, I love that you do that. It's great. And moving to Orkney, how did you find that impacted, or should I say inspired and influenced your photography?
Well, what I would say is for the first 6 months, I had no idea what to take a picture of. I literally went around with my head up in the clouds because we've got all this sky, as you will know, and it's not photogenic in the sense that the Isle of Harris, for example, is photogenic. We don't have the mountains, although, obviously we have numerous beaches. Some photographers come here and think it's featureless and don't like it and just go away again with nothing. And it did take me a long time. But I think what you have to do is tap into the magic, because the magic is strong here. We have a tremendous culture of myths and legends. Obviously the Vikings were here, a massive influence on life here, the language, the culture, the mythology. And you have to be quiet to tap into that. Quite hard for me. And I found that, it took me 6 months to kind of come down to that level of stillness that was needed to start tapping into what was there. We arrived in the summer, and in the winter, when the storms came, that was a big thing for me because, obviously we get a lot of weather and I love that. And being a swimmer, obviously, I'm obsessed with the sea. So that was kind of my way in, I think. And once I started looking at the pictures, using my long lens so you can get right into the waves, I just began to see all these mythological creatures in the water. And people was like, well, what on earth are you drinking? What are you on that you can see all these things? But I know they're there, and it kind of went on from there, really. That was the start of it. And what I love best are the top and the bottom of the year. The bottom of the year, obviously, we're there now. We're coming up. It's like 3 weeks to the solstice, and the light is incredible. The sun is very low in the sky, 10 degrees above the horizon, and the shadows are so long and deep and red. And it's just a gorgeous time to be here. You have to be very organised with your time, though, because, after about 2:30, the light is, can be too poor for photography. And then midsummer, it doesn't get dark. It's just wonderful, and that's when the magic, I think, is strongest in a way. I follow a colony of Arctic terns that I'm pretty obsessed with. It's a very small colony, barely viable, so every year I hope that they will come back. And it's in quite a remote location. So, I'll take the car and sometimes I just won't bother coming home. I'll just photograph till about 11:30 at night. And then I'll just go and try and put my head down for about 3 hours. And then I'll get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and just wait for the sun. And, it's just magical. And you can hear the curlews in the background and the oyster catchers. And, it's fabulous. It's fabulous. It really is.
Wow. I think it was about 3 days after the summer solstice this year that we were over, and it was that long days and the light and the feel of it. It was so warm there this summer at that time as well. And the second time I've been to Orkney, the first time I went for photography, and I had a bit like that experience that you spoke about earlier. I went there and I was like, it's so flat. It's like there's nothing to photograph. And I really struggled with it. But then going back a second time and actually getting involved with the kind of arts and the culture and the local community, I started to feel the magic of it. And I came away with some phenomenal puffin images that they're still to this day some of my favourites. So yeah. I think as well, you mentioned there that the solstices around those times are very strong and magical with the light. But I think being somewhere like Orkney, the energy at that time of year is also really strong, isn't it?
It is. It definitely is, yeah. And the other thing I love to do is flower photography and get right down on the ground, and it's those in-between spaces that I look for. That's where the magic is, that's where the fairies are, or, whoever they are that live in these little spaces. You can find them, but you have to be still and you have to listen. And they don't always reveal themselves, I find. Sometimes you'll come away with nothing. But another way that way in that I found when I was really struggling, as you say, with how on earth am I going to photograph this place that I now call home, was I started homing in on details like rocks and lichen and, little things like that, finding the patterns, finding the rhythms. And that was a good way in, I found. And then when lockdown happened and I couldn't go anywhere apart from, around my house, that was a real eye-opener as well, because I discovered all sorts of things within a mile in each direction of the house that I had never seen before. So, I was lucky to be in such a place and have plenty to keep me occupied.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, to be somewhere so beautiful like that at that time, it must have been a real joy in some respects, because you would have got the chance to really slow down and tune in more to the place that surrounded you as well. And you'd mentioned earlier about the wild weather that you get over there and all the different seasons. So how do you feel when you're out photographing that? Because I've seen some of your wave imagery, and they're so, like, the waves when it's stormy over there are so powerful and so big and so strong. Like, how do you feel when you're out there immersed in all of that?
I feel like I want to hurl myself into the sea to be part of it, if I'm honest. And that's not a death wish or anything like that. It's just that it's so all-encompassing, as you say. You've got this energy coming from 3,000 miles away, through all this Atlantic weather that it's picked up on the way. And it's just very, very compelling. Very compelling. And I actually want to know what it feels like. It's almost like being part of a creation event, I would think. So I don't know, maybe there's just some minuscule strand in our DNA somewhere that, I don't know. I'm sure there isn't, but that takes us back somehow. It's this primal thing, isn't it? With anything like waves or rocks. They're almost as old as the universe, aren't they? Well, I'm going to have some scientist on here taking me to task with that sentence. But yeah, definitely a sort of primal need to be a part of it, I think.
Have you always had these feelings? Like, when I listen to you speaking, I can sense that you're very in tune with what's going on around you, and you're almost like sensing things, that aren't just visual. It's like you're really feeling into the environment. You're getting these like imaginative thoughts and these feelings, and it's like a very philosophical thing almost, and a sort of exchange. Because some people naturally have that, and some people develop it. But I feel like with you, it's just like it's almost like all encompassing in a very positive way. Have you always been like this, or have you developed this ability over the years?
I suspect I have always been like it. Although, raising a family and going out to work, it just gets completely pushed to one side. I just find, I need to be quiet. And that's partly why I wanted to move somewhere like this, because I wanted to find that part of myself again. When I was a small child, my dad was a music teacher, and I came from a very loving home, all that, but I was very much discouraged from experimenting with things. I learnt the piano, and it had to be just as it was written. And if I tried to go move outside that box, it was made very clear to me that that's not what you do. You must stick to what's there. And I had the same thing at school with my writing. I tried to be very imaginative and was told that you can't write like that. I'll put a line through it if you do that again. And being a good little girl and very well brought up, I did as I was told. I wasn't the type to be rebellious and break out of that box at the time. But I've always known that I've got that in me. And I think this was my time to bring it out, actually. Yeah.
Wow. How lovely to be able to reconnect with that. I believe we all kind of have that as children, but it's almost like drummed out of us in many ways. And
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. As I say, once you have a family or you get married or you have to go to work full time. Yeah.
It's really lovely that you've been able to now go to Orkney and reconnect with that and really have that space and that peace, and also just the history of the place as well, to really tap into that. It must have almost been like a coming home to you in many ways.
No, I don't think it was actually. I think I was out of my comfort zone for quite a long time. In fact, it was all a bit strange. Um, and I think because I found it difficult to connect with the landscape at first, but then that's all part of the plan, isn't it? That you're pushed out of your comfort zone, and you have to find other ways to do things. I think had we moved to, say, Northumberland or the Scottish borders, I would have felt at home immediately. And I suspect I wouldn't have had to work as hard to, to find those special places and to reconnect with, the abilities, the creative abilities that we all have and tend to lose. Yeah. So no, it wasn't immediate at all.
Wow. Yeah, it's really interesting because some people say, they find somewhere that feels like home, and when they get there, it's like everything is just released. But then there's also people like yourself who it's like you go somewhere so different, so foreign and almost uncomfortable to what you're used to living in. And it's like trying to find a way through that, trying to find inspiration. And sometimes for some people, that's where the magic happens. And yeah, it's lovely to hear that's what happened for you.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely true for me, and I'd encourage anyone who's sort of struggling to, ask yourself, well, why have I been sent here? What is it about this place that, has been sent to me to discover, what I'm about, and, what it can give me and what I can give to the world through where I am, through the landscape or the sea or whatever, because, that's very important to me. I mean, we're all aware of global warming and all the, the horrors going on, but, I want to be able to spread beauty because I hope it just makes people care, I don't know if it does, but I like to think it does. It's my contribution.
I think anyone who does some sort of creative thing with their life and they're putting it out there, it doesn't matter if it reaches one person or a million people. I think, it's there's something about putting yourself and your energy into creation. I think it just positively, the more people that do that, the more it just like it's a collective thing of inspiration. And it's very clear from like your imagery, I feel there's a lot of feeling in your photographs because there's a lot of flow and a lot of movement. It's not like a static photograph. It's like you're really moving and immersing yourself in the elements. Is that quite a conscious thing to have this flow and movement in your photos?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, I've always loved dance and ballet, and I've always, like, for example, my Arctic terns, it is like a ballet to me, watching them move. The wind, again, is extremely important in my particularly my seabird photography and most particularly my Arctic tern photography, because, they're these very small birds, small, tiny, petite bodies with these great, long, immensely long wings. If you look on my website, one of the ones, I think there's a couple of them in last summer's gallery where they've landed and then they do this beautiful thing where they put their wings up like this, and you think those wings just go on forever. So, of course, when it's windy, like 40 miles an hour, very windy, and they're trying to land, they're literally being knocked sideways. And it is like watching a ballet, and I just love that. And this whole thing about their migration, their annual migration, it's the longest migration of any creature in the world. I mean, can you imagine that? It's just extraordinary. But they're always on the move, and, where they go and what they do is unknowable to us. And I love that. It's all part of the mystery and the magic. I just wish I could morph into an Arctic tern and go with them and just, live a life on the waves and up in the air. And yeah, what they must see. It must be amazing, don't you think?
Yes.
Absolutely incredible.
Yeah. And what I'd said a few minutes
and the
ago.
fact that, sorry to interrupt you, I remember, the fact that fulmars, we have a lot of beautiful northern fulmars here, they just get going when the wind is above 25 miles an hour. Imagine that. The windier, the more they love it. And, that's just incredible to see them soaring on the wind. They're just playing, you can tell they're just loving it. It's really great.
Wow.
Yeah.
Birds are fascinating creatures, aren't they? And I think just listening to how you speak about how you're creating your images and how you're feeling into your subjects, I think there's something beautiful when a creative person can actually put themselves in what they're creating. And when you can really have that connection, but also you saying that you were very much into dancing when you were a child, it's like when we reconnect with that and bring that into our creativity in a different way, we can see all of these like things that just marry up. And it's like, I think that's why I find your images quite emotive, and I'm sure many people do, because you put so much into them, maybe not consciously, but it's almost like, you know, all of your experience, your interests and how you're feeling in that moment is being transmuted into each image that you're creating.
Well, it's very kind of you to say so. The other thing that's very, very important to me is music. You know, I mentioned my dad. My dad was a music teacher, and you know, I met my husband through music, so it's always been a very, very important part of our lives. And I particularly love the French Impressionists. You know, Debussy, Ravel. You know, again, you know, that very ethereal, flowing, barely there sort of sound has very much influenced a lot of my bird photography, I think. You know, with my wader photography, I deliberately wait for a very high key day, you know, and then I'll overexpose like mad. And then they just look like these little black and white, little, you know, wind up toys on the beach. Very ethereal, you know. And again, that will tie into the flight photography and the ballet, you know, that very ethereal sort of look. Yeah. So that's very important. And I suppose to some extent, jazz. You know, I'm not a huge jazz fan. I'm very I don't know much about it at all. But when I hear something, you know, some jazz that I particularly like, I'll think, oh yes, you know, that definitely again taps into that freedom, that sense of freedom, which is really what I want. You know, I don't want to be constrained by what, for example, a camera club judge might think would be a good image. It just doesn't interest me. You know, I want to express that freedom and that flow and that beauty. Yeah, that's definitely what I'm after.
That's one of the beautiful things about photography is it can, you know, anybody can pretty much do photography, but to create images that suit themselves. You know, some people are more technical and gear orientated, and other people are like yourself that are so creative, and you're kind of pushing the limits of your camera with the overexposed images and the movements and different shutter speeds, and you're creating these beautiful pieces of artwork. They're, yeah, very nice.
Yeah, I was told actually when I first started out at Cheltenham Camera Club, I was mentored by a lovely chap called Lee Preston from Gloucester Camera Club. Some of your listeners may know him. He's a black and white specialist. And I'm very, very untechnical. I'm really not at all good with, you know, buttons and dials and things like that. So I was very alarmed at the prospect of having to learn about how to use a DSLR, for example. But what he said to me was, only learn as much as you will need to use. And it's been the best advice, you know. And so that was kind of the way it went, because I think something else had happened fairly early on. I probably around 2007, 2008, when at the time when he sort of came into my photographic life, was that I'd been in Florida and photographing egrets and things. And I made a mistake with the exposure one time. And I got this wonderful high key image of a great egret with an eel wrapped round its bill with all the movements. And I hadn't been aiming for that, because at that stage I didn't know how to do that. I didn't realize that was even an option, you know. And it was when I saw that I thought, right, okay, so now I'm going to have to learn to break the rules, you know. So he encouraged me to do that. He very much encouraged me to follow my own voice and, as I say, just learn enough about the camera that would serve me. Never mind what anybody else was doing. If I want to blow the highlights, etc. You know. A few blown highlights never hurt anyone.
Now, that's really beautiful advice. And I think, you know, there's probably many people listening today that struggle with the technicalities. And just to hear you say, just learn as much as you need to learn, break the rules, and the fact that, you know, you don't need to be a technical photographer to enjoy photography. And I think
just have fun, experiment. I would encourage anyone to experiment. And I remember some years ago taking a friend to Slimbridge in Gloucestershire, when we lived south, because she wanted to know exactly how I did the high key stuff. She didn't believe me. You know, and I said, oh, you know, just overexposing camera. So, right, come on, I'll take you down there. And off we went. And she took a picture and it was like, I don't know, 1 stop overexposed. I'm like, no, 3 stops overexposed, and then some. She was like, I can't do that. I said, oh, yes, you can. And she did. And she was like, oh, now I understand. So, yeah, you've just got to have a bit of courage. And, digital photography, you can wipe it if you don't like it. Nobody has to see it. It doesn't matter.
That is so empowering. I think that's seriously so many people to hear that. It's just so empowering to hear that, because I think, I've found this a lot is, if I think there's a lot of maybe criticism or judgment in certain parts of the photography world. Oh, you don't know how to do this, or you're not doing that right. But it's like, but my images are turning out fine. It's just, I might not have used the same settings that you would. But, I often say there's like 5 ways you can set up your camera to get the same results. And it's about finding, the way that works for you, and just being creative and allowing yourself to do so. And I just think what you've just shared there will be so empowering for many people to hear, because like with me and my camera, there's so much it can do that I've never learned. And I think maybe
same here.
Yeah, and I think inside there's a part of me that's felt a bit like I can't be a proper professional photographer because there's so much in my camera that I don't know how to use. But I'm like, but I like my images, and I think, so that's all that matters. It's like
all that matters. Yeah. I quite agree. I'll never be one of these who wants all the latest gear. Not that I could afford it, but I can't see the point. Just make the best out of what you have. Not everyone perhaps can afford a DSLR. You can do so much with a phone,
Yes. That's one thing I've realised. Yeah.
A lot of my, my very close work that I've done recently with the ice puddles and the seaweed, it's all done on a phone. And I just go over it and Snapseed and tidy it up, or put a bit of a vignette on it or something, and it's so easy and quick and simple, and anyone can do it, and that's and it's accessible. As you say, it's anyone can have a go at that. And I would recommend the Snapseed app. I think it's fantastic. I don't know if it's available on an Apple. But certainly on the Android, and it's free and it's very intuitive. Even I could work it out. So it's a lot of fun. And you could do raw files on it too. You can download. In fact, when we were in Aviemore, I was downloading a lot of stuff from my camera, straight onto my phone via the computer, and just dealing with the raw files on the phone. Just to really see what would happen. I wouldn't do it for images because a lot of my bird images are quite noisy. I need to use noise reduction because the light here can be very low. But things like the woodland photography that we were doing, for example, or the reflections, it worked just fine. It was great.
Yeah. I love that you spoke there about making it accessible to people, because that's, one thing, money, not everybody can afford high quality cameras, and not everybody would want to, but also, you don't always have it on you. And there's been times in the past when I've been out without my camera and I've been like, oh, this is such a good moment. And I didn't have a very good quality phone at the time, whereas I recently was forced to upgrade my phone because the other one broke. But now it's like the technology in the past 5 years and on phones is just incredible. I'm filming my YouTube videos on my mobile now, and rather than going around with a big camera, and it's just been so freeing for me because I can literally just take it out whenever I feel inspired to speak and just vlog away.
And I think the other thing with the phone is it helps me to see, I can look through this little screen, and it helps me with composition a lot of the time. I like it. I find it a very intuitive way of working, actually. And as you say, you don't always have your big camera on you. Sometimes it's just not possible. So, we were in Australia a year ago visiting our son. And apart from the bird photography, when I did use my long lens, I did everything else on my mobile. And I made a blurb book of our holiday, like our holiday album. And honestly, you would never know they'd been taken on a mobile. They look fantastic. They look so nice. So, and it's, you've just got it in your pocket. It's great. Really great.
Yeah. Yeah, brilliant. That's fantastic. I think one thing I mentioned earlier, you'd mentioned, is your love for wild swimming, and listen to you speaking about the flow and wanting to be in the waves and all that in your imagery. Yeah, I just wondered if we could maybe end on talking a bit about your love for wild swimming, because I think when you can immerse yourself in an environment like the sea, I almost feel like it makes you in some ways a better photographer when you're photographing that, because you can feel into the motion that you are when you're in the sea and the coldness of it all. So, yeah, where did your love come from for wild swimming, and how do you feel it not only impacts your life, but maybe your photography inspiration as well?
I've always been a swimmer, right from being a very, very tiny child, and swimming club in my teens and all that sort of thing. And then, family work, I gave up, of course, for some years. Took it up again as a pool swimmer. And then, and I carried on even in America. I did a lot of pool swimming there, a lot of training. My mum died in 2011. And I think at that point, I realized that life was finite. My dad had already died. Then it was my mum. And I'm thinking, oh gosh, next it's me. I better, actually fulfill some long held ambitions. And one of my very long held ambitions was to swim the channel. And you can't do that swimming in a pool. So I didn't swim I haven't swum the channel, but I've swum 2 channel relays, English channel relays. So obviously to do that, you've got to actually find some open water to practice in. So I did that. We were living near Cheltenham, and there's some lakes near Swindon where there's a lot of organised open water swimming. There are groups and courses that you follow and all the rest of it. So I did that, and then I applied for the first channel relay to swim with Diabetes UK, because they send. I'm not sure if they still do it, but I know there are other charities that do. They get a squad together and then they put you in teams of 6, and then they assign you a boat and a pilot, and they make sure you're doing all the training and everything, and then off you go. And it was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. I'm a very competent swimmer. I was confident. I thought this is going to be a breeze. I've got 5 wonderful women with me. We were all about the same standard. It was great. But I've got to tell you, in the middle of the channel, when it's rough and cold, and then you've got to jump into the channel in the dark off this boat, it's absolutely terrifying. I was just so grateful to come back to my warm, loving home. And it made me think about all those refugees who try to cross on unsuitable boats. And oh my goodness, it was a massive lesson in gratitude for my life. We were told beforehand it would change us, and I didn't believe it, but it really does. So then 2 years later, I did it again. I organised a team of 4 myself, and we did it again. And of course, by then I was thoroughly hooked. I've done, some longer swims by myself. Moving to Orkney, of course, we're absolutely spoilt for beautiful places to swim. What I do need is a bay to swim across, because I don't like to talk when I'm swimming. I like to have my face in the water, swimming front crawl, just absorbed in my own little bubble. And I just find it clears your head like nothing else, If I'm miserable, I can go in and I can cry into my goggles. And then after 20 minutes, half an hour, I realise that it's all just gone away. And I feel so much better. It's just incredible. Absolutely incredible. And it really takes you into the moment for lots of reasons. Winter swimming, which obviously we're doing now. The sea is now very cold. It's very icy here at the moment, as I'm sure it probably is where you are. It is a matter of life and death. So you absolutely have to be aware of the signals your body is giving you. You can't be thinking about Tesco or what's for dinner or whatever else, how many Christmas cards you haven't written. You've got to be focused totally in the moment. And for me, that's like a form of meditation. I don't want to sit still and meditate. The idea bores me to death. I know it works for a lot of people. It doesn't work for me. But if I get in and, part of the thing again is the movement through the water, I just find just wonderful. Wow. It's wonderful. It's so good for the soul and the mind.
Yes.
I pool train as well in the winter, because I can't be in the sea really long enough for fitness. So, at the moment I'm trying to go to the pool 2 or 3 times a week as well. But in summer, I've stopped the pool and I just swim for as long as I want. And then, of course, you see nice things. I mean, at the moment where we're swimming, because obviously it will depend on wind direction to some extent, you need to be safe. At the bay we're swimming in at the moment, there are seals. And, they'll swim next to you. And it's amazing. These little youngsters.
Oh,
Yeah. And then, of course,
wow.
beautiful seaweed you swim over and, you see starfish and crabs and yeah, and I've just made the best friends. I haven't met an open water swimmer I didn't love. So that's, also really, really nice. Great group of people. And we get to eat cake because, we've been in the cold water.
Yes, yes. No, I remember when I did wild swimming. The community, like you said, the people you meet, they're just so lovely. There's
Oh,
just
yes.
something about the camaraderie and the openness and the supporting nature of it all. It's like, yeah, it's just so
It's like
beautiful.
nothing
Like,
else.
yeah,
And there's no sense of
yeah.
competition like there would be in the pool. We're all just doing our own thing at our own level, at our own pace, and everybody's fine with that. And if some people want to wear a wetsuit or gloves and booties, nobody cares. It's just whatever is good for you. And I love that. It's a really nice, supportive group of people. Really, really nice.
Yeah. And I found for me it did wonders for like my body image because you're out there, in your swimming costume in the middle of, nature, in the middle of, the public, and nobody cares what you look like and you don't care what anybody else looks like. And I think being a woman, particularly, of course, men go through this as well, but I think there was something so liberating about being in the sea with a big group of women, all shapes and sizes, and just nobody cared. And it was just so liberating. And you were like, oh my gosh, I'm walking around the beach in Scotland in a swimming costume and I just don't care.
Yeah, absolutely right. Same here. We're all shapes and sizes, all different abilities, and nobody cares. And it's very liberating. I quite agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Brilliant.
And
Great.
strangers
Well,
will talk to you, and I love that. They'll want
yes.
to know what we're doing, or gosh, tell us how mad we are, or how amazing we are sometimes. Usually mad.
Yeah. Yeah. It always gets people talking, doesn't it?
Yeah, totally.
Brilliant. Oh, well, thank you so much for your time today, Nicki. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you. And I'm sure there's a lot that people will have gained from what you've shared today. I think particularly from an empowerment perspective, it's been beautiful. And for those who have resonated with your story and would like to see your images, where can they go to do so?
Well, my website is nickigwynjones.com. Nicki, Gwyn with two N's. I'm on Facebook and Instagram, just as Nicki Gwynn-Jones. So, come and join the party. I would love to say hello. And thank you so much for inviting me, Kim.
You're very welcome. And I will put a link to everything you've just mentioned in the show notes below. So yeah, thank you once again, Nicki. It's been an absolute pleasure.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you.
Well, that was certainly a magical conversation. I hope Nicki has sparked a lot of excitement in your imagination too, and you feel liberated now to head out and freely create images in whatever way you personally would like to. I want to say a huge thank you for taking the time to listen to this podcast today. And if you'd like to connect with Photographic Connections further, we've got an online community. I run online courses, in-person photography weekends in Scotland, and I also offer one-to-one mentoring as well. You can find all the details to this on photographicconnections.com. And now that this podcast has come to an end, there's only one thing left for you to do. It's time to pick up your camera and head outdoors. There's so many incredible photographic opportunities just waiting for you to discover.